Hey, what is up, you beautiful people? Welcome to another video. Welcome to part 4 of the Ultimate S63 Rebuild series. And today is a very special video because we finally start putting together our engine. So just to recap on the whole series in case you're new around here, we found out what was wrong with our engine. We found the infamous rod bearing issue. There was this really loud banging noise, really unpleasant, but we successfully identified where the problem came from, which meant that we had to take apart the whole entire engine. And that's exactly what we did. Took apart the engine. We've actually took the engine to a machine shop. We got it professionally checked, make sure that everything is up to spec. We have resurfaced the engine, cleaned the engine. We have resurfaced the heads, cleaned the heads on the previous videos, and we actually rebuilt the heads. New seals, clean valves, clean valve seats, and everything is ready now to where we can actually start building up our engine. And in this video, we're gonna finally start putting together the bottom end, the rotating assembly. And in typical fashion, let's look at some of the comments from last video, last week, just so you can keep up to date with the project, and also to show some love and some appreciation for the ones watching and leaving the comments on these videos. And the very first comment says, big respect to you, bro, for working on this nightmare. Definitely not easy and a very complicated engine. Had to work on my S63 valve stem seals and did remove both heads while the engine is in the car. It was super fun. Lol, keep us updated. I don't know how you did it with the engine still in the car. Hopefully your back is okay. Hopefully your back survived, because that engine bay is very tight and those heads are heavy. And to be able to manage around all the cables, the wiring and everything to access the valve, to access the seals, to access the valve stem seals, I know it was a pretty complicated job, but I'm glad you were able to get it done. For me, it was much easier because the engine was already outside of the car. The heads were apart, so it made my life that much easier. So I cannot even imagine being able to do that with an engine inside the car. So props to you, my friend. Bullets Garage 5 says, great update video. These past videos you're kind of run us through the major steps you're doing. Do you think you can make more specific make videos of more specific things as you're putting the engine back together? Actually, that's a great comment. I start rebuilding the car. Most of the work was done prior of me actually creating the videos, and I decided to share this out there because when I was putting together the car, when I was rebuilding the engine, I couldn't find that much information, especially on YouTube, because I mean, for obvious reasons, it's a very complicated engine. It's an expensive engine. People are not working on this engine on their garage. So that is why I decided to create this video. And I didn't really know what you guys were looking for, what you guys needed. But now that there's a few people interested, definitely I can do more in-depth and specific videos. Whatever you guys need, do let me know, because I would love to help you guys out. And also, help you learn more things about this video, make it entertaining, of course, but also if you do need to use this video as a tutorial to work on your engine, definitely let me know what you guys need help with, and I'll be more than happy to help you guys out. And this is actually the perfect time. I'm very happy that you left this comment, because putting back the engine is a great time for us to get specific down to the details as we rebuild the engine from the ground up. Taking apart the engine is easy. Well, it's not easy, but it's easier than actually putting everything back together, because everything has to go back in a specific way. And if anything goes wrong, then it will not be a pretty sight. Young Truck D says, what's up, bro? Keeping up with the build, but definitely wanted to comment at 354 subs, because man, you're gonna blow up for sure. I really appreciate the love. I appreciate the comment. And yeah, we've gained a few subscribers since then, and I'm very happy about that. I'm very happy that these videos were able to find an audience. With that being said, let's jump on the video and start building our engine from the ground up. So we are going to start with the heart of the engine, which is the crankshaft, the thing that actually went wrong in the first place. As you know, the rod bearings left the chat and they decided to take the crankshaft along with it, and we were able to get our hands on a new crankshaft. And we're going to start with the block and the crankshaft. So I just attached the block to a engine holder, and before we install the crankshaft, of course, we're going to have to install the main bearings. Now, when I took apart the engine, the main bearings were relatively okay. They did not take that much of a beating. I only found a few light scores here and there from the metal shavings, but the good thing about our engine is, you know, of course BMW engines have their issues. The previous engine, the V10 engine, is known for having rod bearing issues, and that still carries until this very date with the V8 M5 engines that is still in production till this date. Of course, it's not as bad as the previous engine, but it's still there. In fact, that's exactly what went wrong with my engine. Now, the good thing about our engine is that I've never really heard of issues with main bearings. The main bearings on our engines are relatively bulletproof. But since I'm here already, of course, I went ahead and got myself some brand new set for main bearings. And when it comes to rod bearings and main bearings, I'll let you know exactly which company I went with, which product I used. But there's a bunch of them out there depending on the application, depending what you need it for, road versus track, how much power you're going to be pushing. But I decided to go with King bearings for my main bearings for the S63 TU. Also, the oil squirters sit right between the block and the crankshaft, and that was removed by the shop when they were cleaning every single surface and every single hole inside of the engine block. So I was able to put the oil squirters in there in the right position. Now, putting the engine main bearing in there is relatively smooth, is relatively easy. All you have to do is make sure that the groove aligns in the block and the main bearing, and once you put it in there, just make sure it's tight. You might hear a little noise, meaning that it was able to pop right in there. Now, before we actually assemble everything, call it a day, we have to put the main bearings in there, install the crankshaft, tie everything down, and take some measurements. And let me show you how to do that process. So interestingly enough, the S63 engine has these massive main bearing caps that actually holds the crankshaft to the block. The reason why I say mass is because I was looking at some engines. Most engines sometimes use just only 2 bolts to hold everything down, but this engine not only has 2, actually doesn't have 4, it has 6 bolts in different sizes to hold everything down. There's of course the main bearing bolt and a few bolts that goes right next to it. And the tighten sequence, once you have the crankshaft in there, assuming that the engine is upside down, you have the crankshaft in there sitting on top of the main bearings. What you want to do is you want to put the crankshaft down smoothly. Now be careful because the crankshaft is of course very heavy, so if you cannot do it by yourself, make sure you have somebody with you to help you. So once you put it in there, this is the specific sequence right over here in which you have to install the main bearing caps. And as you can see, the center one here, you have number 1, 2, and then you go to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That is a specific order in which you're supposed to tie in these main bearing caps. And of course, you cannot just tight these bolts and call it a day. There's a specific Newton meter, specific sequence you're supposed to do them in. And this is the spec sheet right here. So if you look here, you have the 1AZ, and this is the bearing cap of the crankshaft, and it's a specific SAA bolt here, the color bolt. So the way you're supposed to do it is, if you follow the sequence, number 1 and number 2, when you do number 1, you're supposed to hand tight it in, both of them, and then what you're supposed to do is individually you want to torque them down to 20 Newton meters, and then you're supposed to have a specific angle tool to, after that, do 115 degrees on each specific bolt. And this is why the bolts have to be replaced every single time you torque them, because once you torque them down to 20 Newton meters in a certain degree, it's going to change the shape of the bolt, and this is not something you want to take a chance by using the same bolt that has been torqued down more than once. And it says it right here, the very first thing on the Titan specification that tells you replace the bolts. We're going to measure the clearance between the main bearings and the crankshaft. Now, Everything here is OEM specs, so it should be good to go, but I'm going to measure it just in case. So before we tie everything down, we're going to insert a plastic gauge in there. I'm going to tie it down and then remove it again, and then that will allow us to see exactly what the measurements are. Now, once the main bolt is secured, has been torqued down according to the torque specs and to the angle specs, it is time to secure the second bolt right next to it. And it's going to be a very similar process. The joint torque is the initial torque between the two, which is 10 newton meters, and then you're supposed to rotate them 55 degrees each. And of course, you're supposed to replace the screws. You have the initial torque of 10 newton meters, and then after that followed by an angle torque of 55 degrees. And you're going to also torque them down in the very same sequence in which you did the very first main bolts. And after that, it's time for the main bearing tapper screw, and that one is a flange head screw. The specification says here you don't necessarily need to replace that screw since it's not one of the main screws. It's mostly to remove the main bearing cap when you're done. And the joint-in torque is 10 newton meters, and after that you're supposed to follow up with a 45-degree angle. So now, once everything is tied in, we're supposed to work backwards and remove all the bolts, remove the bearing cap, and then check the plastic gauge, which is exactly what we did. So I text these images to a pro, and then I was able to verify that everything was good to go as far as the clearance. So everything was good to go as far as clearance. So now we're going to do the same thing, except that this time, of course, we're going to clean the plastic gauge, make sure it's out of there, and we're going to use machine lube to lubricate the parts and actually put them in there. Now, this is very important. You're supposed to lubricate the parts because when the engine starts for the very first time, there will be no lubrication in there. It's going to take some time for the oil to go from the bottom of the pan to be sucked in by the oil pump and then circulate through the engine. So if you have metal to metal contact in the very first few seconds of your engine starting, you're going to run into some big issues. Now that the crankshaft is in there, everything is tight and secure to the same specifications that we did before, and now that everything is lubricated, the crankshaft and the main bearings are not directly touching each other. There is a lubrication in between. It is time for us to measure the coefficient of friction in between those two. So basically what we're trying to determine here, we're trying to determine the crankshaft breakaway torque. So basically you want to do some measurements and make sure that when the crankshaft is spinning freely, that it's going to fall in the specific specification. And as you can see over here, the max breakaway torque on the crankshaft should be no more than 5 newton meters, and we definitely fell way below that, which is a big plus. Now that the crankshaft is in there, it is time for us to install the pistons, and of course with the rods. Now before I even installed them, I actually took out the piston rings to clean every single part of the ring and the piston and the rods before I place them back in there. And of course I had to replace the rod that was damaged when this issue happened. Now before I go ahead and do this, I had to take some time and go visit a friend of mine, Junior, at a local shop here. In fact, he has a very similar car to mine, a 2014 M5 competition. The only difference is his car is pushing 8,000 horsepower, and he was the one who actually built the engine for that car. His father was an engine builder. He's a successful engine builder, so he definitely knows a thing or two about building S63 engines. So that's what I did, and he gave me a mini lesson on how to put the piston rings together, because the N63 and S63 are known to also have an issue where the oil will pass through the piston rings, and usually when that happens is the ring grooves aligns, and that's where the oil will pass through. But he was able to guide me through that issue and told me exactly how to align the piston rings, and here's a short lesson.
Right here towards 8 o'clock, almost 8 o'clock. All right, it's going to be pointing 8 o'clock.
Right down there.
Yeah, over here. The split groove, you're going to put it at 8 o'clock. The other piston, the one goes, you know how you got 5, 6, 7, 8, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 is passenger side. 5, 6, 7, 8 is the driver's side.
Gotcha.
That's how that works. So when you got number 5, let's say number 5 in like this, right? Your rings, you're going to grab your ring, and your second ring, you're going to point it. You're going to point the second ring, you're going to point it towards the top. You're gonna put that one straight up vertical, right? This one is at 8 o'clock. This one's at 12 o'clock. The top ring, you're gonna put it at 6 o'clock. Because these rings, when you take them off, if you notice them, I'm pretty sure when you took them off, they were all lined up together. Because like the grooves, that's where your oil consumption comes from. Because when you have them all lined up together, it's just seeping right through it.
Oh, so with mileage, is it going to rotate inside the block?
So what it does, so you put this one, like I said, at 8 o'clock, the top one at the second one at 12 o'clock, and then this one at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
So when you got, this is number 5. You have to do two of them like this and 2 of them the other way. So see how you got these 2 pointing this way? Number 6 will be that way. Again, the same way, just like number 5. Then when you go to number 7, all you're gonna do is just move this one to 5 o'clock.
Just the oil.
Just to 5 o'clock.
Okay. So
you're gonna have 2 of them. Then you're gonna have 5 and 6 pointing at 8 o'clock. The oil one. 5 and 6, which is the driver's side. 5 and 6. You're gonna have them pointing at 5 o'clock. 7 and 8. I take that back. 5 and 6. You're gonna point them at 8 o'clock. And then number 7 and 8, they're gonna be towards 5 o'clock.
For example, if it was this motor over here and then you're installing it this way, this is the front.
Yeah.
It's gonna be this one here, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And then the one right next to it.
It's gonna be the same way.
The same way.
The same way. And then the one following it, it's gonna go then at 5 o'clock.
That way. And then the same thing on the other side.
And the same thing on the other side.
Perfect.
That's it. But remember, 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, the top one.
Okay.
And make sure you do not mix them up, because you can mix these rings up.
Yeah. Got it.
You cannot mix them up.
I already removed a few of them with the tool though.
All right, but it's fine. But just make sure.
I didn't go too much. I didn't go crazy.
Just this is very simple. When you remove them, just put one to the side, hold it up, and just.
All right.
And spin them out.
Gotcha.
The tool, what it does, what you do, you could stretch it enough, and you could crack them right here in the corners. You install it on the car's running like shit, and you will know until the motor's already fucked up. And you have to
do the whole thing again.
I'm telling you, because I've done it.
Yeah.
Experience. I'm 43 years old. I've been doing this shit for a long time. My dad's been doing it for a long time. Rest his soul. So trust me.
I feel you, man. I spent 2 weeks taking the motor out of that car.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't have as much experience as you, but trust me.
But I do have the tools. So whenever you get to that point,
now that I have the rings properly installed and the pistons, before I put the piston inside of the engine, I made sure to lubricate the cylinder walls again and install the rod bearings on the top portion of the rods. Now, when it comes to rod bearings, again, there's a bunch of different products out there, but I decided to go after some research with ACL for my rod bearings. So I'm using King bearings for main bearings and ACL for rod bearings. And I had to make sure to install the pistons the same way that I took them out in the first place, by making sure that the letters align with each other, and at the bottom of each rod you will see a specific letter designation that is only supposed to match with the other one. And you will see also, because the way these rods were built, they were actually put together and then broken in a specific way. I don't know how they do it, but basically once you align them, they go in there so smoothly that you don't even notice the line in there, and it's nearly impossible for you to mess with the other one because they just don't align the right way. But just in case, there's also a letter in there, they're supposed to match each other. And to measure the clearance of the rod bearings, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to use the plastic gauge here, and then we're going to put the plastic gauge in there, and then we're going to torque it down. And then the tighten torque has to be very specific for the rod bearings as well. So the initial joint torque has to be 5 Newton meters, and then you have to go 20 Newton meters, and then 30 Newton meters, and then on top of that you have to do a 75-degree angle afterwards. And yes, you have to replace the screws after each use. Now with this process, we can only do 2 at a time because the engine needs to be in a specific location where it's accessible. So you have to do 2 rods, remove them, check the clearance, and then rotate the crankshaft and do the rest of the engines. You cannot do them all at once because each rod is going to be at a different location, because it's going to be very difficult for you to access all of them, because you're going to need to rotate the engine. And when you have the plastic gauge in there, you cannot rotate it because it's going to mess up your measurements. You're supposed to only sit it in there, compress it, and then release it again. That way you can read the measurement. So that's what I did. I took my time, did some measurements, and made sure that everything falls within specs. Now I had to work backwards, remove the caps again, remove the rods, and then clean everything out. Now that I know that everything is within measurements, we're going to repeat the process all over again. Except this time, of course, it is for good. The next time that the engine is going to be rotating, most likely is going to be under combustion. And hopefully everything goes well. Now here's a very big tip throughout this process in case you're working on this engine. Of course, mark each rod that you have torqued down. I have a digital torque that actually also tells me my previous steps. I can trace back and know which one I tied in, which ones I didn't. It's not that great. So what I did is I made sure to mark each bolt, because the last thing I want to do is think that I torqued something down, which in fact I didn't. So I marked everything with the red here, as you can see, twice. One time for the initial torque, the other time for the last final torque and the angle torque. That way I can see visually which ones I did and which ones I didn't. Now that everything is tied in, it is time for me to now install the timing chain sprocket in there. When I bought the crankshaft, it did not come with it, so I got a timing chain sprocket, and this is relatively easy. There's a line in there supposed to align with the crankshaft, and then you have to make sure that we have a key in there. Once you install the key, basically what I had to do is I heat up the sprocket a little bit. Once you heat it up, it's going to expand, and once it expands, you can easily just slide it in there, put it in the position where it's supposed to, make sure that the key aligned, and then once it cools down, it's going to contract and it's going to pretty much stay stuck in there and not come out. Now on the M3 engines, this is a big issue because they're tied in there with friction in order to do the timing. And over time, as you know, the M3 engines are known for having this problem where it will come loose over time, therefore messing up your timing, and that's when all hell breaks loose. But on the S63, luckily for us, it is going to be held together with that key in there. It's going to be very, very tight, but also there will be a harmonic balancer in there. It's going to be tied in together with the main screw on the crankshaft, and then that thing, it is not going to move. It's not going to go anywhere. We have to make sure we put it right, because this is where the timing chain is going to be attached to the crankshaft. So yeah guys, I don't want to make this video too long. This is it for the bottom end. If you have any questions about assembling your bottom end, please let me know down in the comments below, and I'll try my very best to get right back to you guys, or maybe I'll address it in the next video. But on the next video, what we're going to do is actually finish up everything, install the timing chain cover, install the timing chains, and hopefully we can also install the cover in the back. That way we can put the chain for the oil pump as well, because once that's done, then we're going to install the head gaskets, install our heads, and then go into timing our engine, which is crucial. Another important part, that if we do mess up by a few degrees, all hell will break loose, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. So again guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for following up along. I hope you are learning something new. I hope this is entertaining you a little bit. If you have any questions about the build, let me know down in the comments below, and I'll try my best to get right back to you. In this case, I will see you on the next video. Take care.